Okay, so I know it's a little bit late in the day. I hope I will keep your attention. There will be a lot of exercises that I will be doing. And I would like to know who are the guys from the Angular meetup group? Okay, that's because I'm an Angular GD, a Google developer expert, and usually I touch Angular topics. But today I will talk about RxJS. And who has used RxJS in their projects? Okay, so basically RxJS is the Lodash for events. So you can work with events, you can compose events, there's a few operations that you can use, and you can achieve your goals just using streams and operators. We will also see today schedulers, some examples, and basically a lot of people, when you talk about RxJS or asynchronous data streams, it will be like, okay, I don't understand what's going on. Streams is a new concept. A lot of people is used to promises, and streams or observables is just an extension of promises. You can see it. We will see some code. So what I'm going to do is just implement all of these exercises. So there will be some coding. First thing I'm going to do is just map this L. We'll just try it, just to make sure it's working. Okay, just some setup. So we are getting the output there. So the first thing I'm going to do is just review what an observable is. So we're going to start with Marvel diagrams. So we are going to define what's the stream that we want to implement. So we are having, this is the timeline. So we have a value push into it. Sometime later, we get another value. And we are going to use an easy one. Just, it will push 1, 2, 3 values, and then it will complete. Promises, we have only the resolve and the reject. In observables, we have 3 methods that we can call. So I'll create what is called an observer, and we will define these methods. I hope you are used to ECMAScript 6 lambda or arrow functions. So basically, this is an anonymous function that it will just take this value and output it. So that's the next. The complete is taking no arguments. It's just triggering the end of the stream. I'm going to use the pipe, just as we did in the Marvel diagram. So we have defined the observer. The next thing I'm going to do is create the observable. So we are going to use the API. I've included the RxJS library, so that's available. So we have the observable, and we are going to use one utility method that is off. So we are going just to pass these few values. And up till now, we have done the first stage, and in observables, we use 2 stages. One is the setup, and the other one is execution. So for now, we have done the setup. What we are saying here in the observer is every time that the inner observable is calling to this, pushing these values, we are going to execute this logic here. So we are just defining these event handlers that look really similar to what we have in promises. The only thing that we don't have in promises is the completed event. Let's continue and get these values out on the screen. Let's execute this observable. So the way we do that is subscribing to it. We use subscribe. And what we are going to do is use the observer that we define it. before. So far, so good. So let's just run this. So we will get, sorry, that's complete. So we get the values that we were expecting. Basically, we are pushing these 1 to 3 values, and then by the end, we are calling complete. But we cannot see that. So during this session, I will try to show you what's going on inside this observable. So let's try to create it just from this code. So instead of using this off operator, I'm going to use the create API and just trying to replicate the behavior. So this takes an observer, and we are going to define what's going to happen. So what I'm going to do is just take the observer and call these methods that will just push these values into the stream. I'm using observable or stream. I think the best term would be observable sequence. So actually, we are naming a collection, a series of values that will come over time. So let's just add another one just to get the same output. And then we will call complete, just to get the same behavior. So if we remove this line here, and we execute it, you see that the last event is not triggering, this last method is not being called. So you can see how the implementation is changing the behavior of the observable. So that's quite interesting. I think I just finished the first. So I'm going to start changing. So the first exercise is done. What I'm going to do next is add error handling. So let's imagine we get an error. So we're just going to throw an exception here. Nothing too complex. So we get this error on the console, and this is going to stop our logic. So that's not something that we want. The way we can fix that is just wrapping the text in a try-catch. So let me do that real quick. So we are going to take this error, and we are going to just pass it through the stream. So errors are going also in the same pipe or in the same stream that we are pushing the values. So we are calling the error, and then we are passing the content of it. So let's just fix a little bit the formatting. What we need to do now is define what we want to do for error handling. So I'm going to define just a simple, well, we can use the X, but actually if we want to use the actual error that throw the exception, we can change it and use that instead. So we have seen now how we can implement a simple observable. We also have seen how we can implement error handling. This is, making our code a little bit more cumbersome. So we are going to remove that for the next exercise. Let me so usually we won't be having this try-catch, just to make it easier to follow. Okay, so that's done. The next thing I'm going to do is implement the interval operator. So let me explain how that works. I'm going to change this, and basically this is going to look something like this. We have some delay. I'm going to use half a second. And what it's going to do is just push these values for us. And we'll start like pushing the first value and so on. And this will continue indefinitely. And in order to get that behavior, we are going to change our observable a little bit. So what I'm going to do is we are going to use some variable to hold this counter. And I'm going to use setInterval. And this is going to execute this function that I'm going to write here. I'm going to push the value and increment it. And I'm going to interval, the same delay that I'm passing through there. So we get that behavior. Let's just run it to see how it works. So it's just doing exactly what we wrote in our marble diagram. So it's just waiting for this half a second and just pushing these values. The next thing we want to do, so that's all good. The thing is, usually when you have this type of observables, you don't want the observable to keep going. You want to stop. You want to stop. You want to cancel that observer. You don't want to get more values. Imagine you have a Twitter feed, and you're receiving a lot of tweets, and you just want to stop that. If you navigate to another section of your application, you want to stop that, and then just keep the application not wasting resources. So let's going to do that. In order to do that, we are going to take the token that setInterval returns, and we can use that to cancel that observable. So within the specifications of observables, if we return a function, that function will be used for to cancel, to unsubscribe. So let me just use clear interval. And this is basically using the token, the reference from the token, just to stop this interval to keep going. So it won't execute anymore after we call it. One way to run this code is just using setAmount. We're going to wait just a little bit. So if it's, let's wait just, sorry. This is going to return a subscription. And we can use that subscription to unsubscribe. And we can wait, for example, if there is half a second, we are going to wait a second and a half, and then that observable will stop. So let's run that. And what we see now is we receive these three values, and then it stops. So basically, that's how you would implement this feature. And obviously, this is part of the specification of the observable. So we return this function, and this is being called when we call unsubscribe. So that's the only trick you have to remember. I think that's all for this exercise. I think the most interesting exercise that I'm going to do is the implementation of the map operator. So let's implement that. So I'm going to take this code here. And before I do that, let me just change this again. We are going to use the previous observable that we created at the beginning. And the map function is really similar to what we have in JavaScript, array extensions. So we can take that. And what we are going to do is create another observable. If you notice, I'm using $, at the end of the label, and that means that that's an observable. It's kind of a convention, a name convention. So this is going to create these values as a result of applying map, and we are going to implement this here. So just let me quickly implement the original one. So I'm going to reproduce the original observer that is pushing this 1, 2, 3, and then finishing it complete. Okay. So we don't need this anymore, just to make it a little bit easier. Okay, so this is the start. So let's see that it's working. We are getting the original. So we have already this stream working, and now we want to add this, this feature. What I'm going to do is define the transform. I'm going to create this function, and it's going to take this, the input observable, and also it's going to take a function that I'm going to call with this map function. So let's just show it quickly. Transform, and I'm going to take the original stream, and then I'm going to call this map function. Now we are going, instead of subscribing to the original, I'm going to subscribe to the the result of the transform, and this function is going to return a new observable. So basically, what we are doing in RxJS operators is always returning a new instance. So let's create that observable. Okay, and this observable is going to be the same. We're going to use the same approach. We're going to use an observer, and we are going to map the input next and complete calls. We're going to map them into this new observable. So let's see how we are going to do that. So we're going to use subscribe, and as we did before, we are going to map this next into this new observer. And I'm going to call next, but now, instead of passing just the value, I'm applying the function first. That will make the value double the value. And then the complete will just call the complete. So I'm just mapping these two functions. This should already work. Let's see. So now we are getting 2, 4, and 6. This is the result of just doubling these values that we push into the first observable. What we are going to do is, usually the operator is called in this way. So we want to change this, and what we are going to do is change the observable. We are going to patch using the prototype. And add this transform function. In this way, we can call it as the operators are usually called in the library. And the only change we need to add here is create this input stream that now is going to come from this. And this is going to work because this will be bind to the original subscriber. So let's see how that's working. Okay, let me see. Okay, I didn't remove the parameter. Sorry. Thanks very much. So that's basically the implementation for map. We can use this and change it real quick to implement filter. And what we are going to do is just take the odd numbers. So we now define this function. When the value passes the expression and the expression evaluates to true, it will just let the value pass. So that's more or less what we want. We will get the value 2, and then it will end, because there are no more values. So let's implement this really quick. I'm going to change this function here, and now what we want to do is when this expression evaluates to true, we are going to pass this value through. And this is kind of a hack of JavaScript. How many people know about this hack? Okay, so what is happening here is usually we are used to the OR operand and we use that as to get a default value when the left side is falsy. What we are using here is the same principle, but with the AND operand. And it's quite harmful. So we are going to execute and see the result. We're getting the right result. So we are just getting through the odd number. So we already did the map and the filter. The only thing that is left is the scheduler. So I'm going to use a promise. And OK, I need some code here. So let me do some refactor. We don't need this. OK, we don't need this. So what I'm going to do is show the difference between an observable and a promise, and how we can make advantage of some operators and schedulers. So let me just remove this code and start with a promise. So I'm going to create a promise really quick. And I'm just going to resolve to one value. So that's going to just resolve that value. And I'm going to console it out. And then I'm going to use another one here. So usually, if we execute this code, what we're going to get is the values 2 and 1. So we can see that the promise is executing asynchronously. So first, this is going to execute and go to the queue. And then once this code is executed, as if there is no more code, it will just take this value from the queue and execute it. And that's why we get this reverse order. What happens with observables is that, against common knowledge, and usually we think about observables as asynchronous, what will happen is it will execute synchronously. And let's just demonstrate that. I'm going to use just push one value and just print this out really quick. So that may surprise some of you. So we can see that actually this is not going to the queue, and it's just being executed at the time of the subscribe. One way we can change this code is obviously if we use set timeout, we can force it, and now it will behave asynchronously. So now we get the expected behavior. The only thing is now this code is completely dependent. So what we want to do is use a scheduler, and the operator for that is subscribe on one of the operators, and we can pass the scheduler, and there are a few of them. The default is the queue, and that will just execute synchronously, but the one that we want is the async one. And that's changing the context where this observable is executing. So if you are having some problems, you're expecting the observable to behave asynchronously, but it's behaving synchronously, you can change it really quick here. I think that's all I wanted to show you today. So let me just give you some URL. You can use my GitHub URL. I don't know if you can see it, but I hope I could explain observables in an easy way that you can go home and start using them.